let's dive right into what is without a doubt the darkest day in Indian aviation history. We really need to unpack exactly what went wrong up there, and more importantly, how it fundamentally changed the skies forever. In this explainer, we're going to take a deeply detailed, highly immersive look at a tragedy that unfolded miles above the Earth. By breaking down the exact sequence of events, step by step, we're going to see how aviation safety isn't just about, building better airplanes. It's actually about understanding human communication, psychology, and the invisible technological safety nets that literally guard our modern skies. 349. Just let that number sink in for a second. 349 lives lost. To this day, it remains the deadliest mid-air collision in the history of aviation. Now, on the evening of November 12, 1996, the sky over the small town of Charkhi, Dadri in Haryana, India, was completely shattered. We're talking about two massive commercial airliners, a Saudi Arabian Airlines Boeing 747 with 312 people on board, and a Kazakhstan Airlines Ilyushin Il-76 carrying 37 people, colliding in midair. There were absolutely zero survivors. I mean, think about it. The sky is this near-infinite three-dimensional ocean, right? Two planes colliding at cruising altitude is a massive mathematical anomaly. But on this particular night, the unthinkable actually happened. Picture this terrifying reality. A nearby United States Air Force pilot actually watched the whole nightmare unfold in real time. He was flying in the vicinity, descending towards Delhi, when he suddenly saw this massive orange glow light up a cloud at his 2 o'clock position. Now, at first, he thought it was just lightning. But as he kept watching, two enormous fireballs diverged away from each other and started plummeting toward the ground. He immediately keyed his mic and radioed Delhi approach control saying, "We see two fires trying to break to our right. Looks like a big explosion." The two blips that had literally just vanished from the air traffic control radar screen, while they hadn't just lost radio contact, they had been completely obliterated. So here's our roadmap for today. 1. The Charkhi-Dadri disaster. 2. Anatomy of the collision. 3. The Lahoti Commission findings. 4. The invention of TCAS. And finally, 5. Human factors and safety.
Okay, let's start with part 1, the Charkhi-Dadri disaster.
Tracing those final, fateful moments over the fields of Haryana, we have Saudia Flight 763. This is a massive Boeing 747 passenger jet that had just taken off from Delhi, climbing heavily into the night sky. Coming the exact opposite way is Kazakhstan Airlines Flight 1907, which is this really rugged, Soviet-designed Ilyushin Il-76 heavy transport aircraft, and it's descending into Delhi. So at 13:03 UTC, the Saudi 747 departs. Meanwhile, that descending Kazakh Il-76 is instructed by approach control to maintain flight level 150, which just means 15,000 feet. At the same time, air traffic control clears the climbing Saudi jet to flight level 140, or 14,000 feet. Notice that? They are separated by just 1,000 feet of vertical space. Now, that's a standard safety buffer, sure, but when you're flying towards each other at 500 miles per hour, that buffer is practically paper thin. At exactly 13:10 UTC, literally just 7 minutes after the Saudi jets take off, they collide precisely at flight level 140.
Moving on to part 2, let's look at the anatomy of the collision. In the world of aviation safety, they always teach that accidents are rarely caused by just one huge glaring mistake. Instead, it's what we call the Swiss cheese model. Imagine slices of Swiss cheese lined up. Usually, the holes don't align. But sometimes multiple, highly specific errors and flaws line up perfectly, allowing a disaster to pass straight through all the layers. Here, air traffic control explicitly instructed the Kazakh plane to stay up at 15,000 feet, but the Kazakh crew descended to 14,000 feet. By doing that, they sliced perfectly into the exact horizontal and vertical coordinates of the climbing Saudi jumbo jet. It was a catastrophic intersection of mass and velocity. The left wing of the Kazakh plane tore straight through the Saudi aircraft, instantly dooming both planes and sending them plummeting at absolutely terrifying speeds.
So what were the holes in our Swiss cheese here? Well, several compounding variables allowed this cascade of human and technical errors to just go unchecked. First off, there was a vast technical divide. The Kazakh crew was mostly accustomed to using metric altimeters, while global aviation runs entirely on feet. This required some pretty complex mental conversions when you're under pressure. Second, the Kazakh plane utilized a dedicated radio operator. Think about what that means. Vital instructions were filtered through a single person who then had to translate and relay them to the pilots. It created this deadly, high-stakes game of telephone. Third, Delhi's air traffic control only had primary radar. Now, primary radar is kind of like looking at a shadow on a wall.
You know something is there for sure, but you can't tell how tall it is. The controller was practically blind to their altitude, forced to rely completely on the pilot's verbal honesty. And finally, they were operating on a single bidirectional air corridor. Planes taking off and landing were flying head-on toward each other on the exact same invisible highway, separated only by that vertical altitude.
Let's shift gears to Part 3, the Lahoti Commission findings.
So after the crash, investigators had to rely on the cold, methodical evidence from the flight data recorders, and they proved definitively that the collision happened at flight level 140. When these black boxes were pulled from the wreckage and deeply analyzed, they confirmed the Kazakh plane's unauthorized descent. But it was the cockpit voice recorder that revealed the truly desperate, tragic final moments. Just seconds before the impact, the Kazakh radio operator looked at the altimeter, realized they had dropped way too low, and shouted, "Get to 150, because on the 140th, that one." But man, it was just far too late. They were entirely enveloped in heavy clouds, flying completely blind. Ultimately, the official inquiry found it was a fatal misinterpretation of a warning that was tragically taken as a command. The air traffic controller was just trying to build a mental picture of safety for them. He essentially told the Kazakh crew, "Hey, watch out, there's a plane 8 miles away from you, and he is flying at 14,000 feet. But because the Kazakh crew's grasp of aviation English was pretty inadequate, they heard level 140 and seemingly interpreted it as their own clearance to drop down to 14,000 feet. It's heartbreaking. Through the filter of limited English proficiency, a totally routine traffic advisory literally became a death sentence.
Which brings us to Part 4, the invention of TCAS.
Here is the hard truth they learned. When human communication breaks down that catastrophically, you kind of have to remove the human from the loop entirely. Enter TCAS, or the Traffic Collision Avoidance System. I want you to think of this as a digital force field securely wrapped around modern commercial aircraft. Now, to be fair, it had been in development for years prior, but horrific crashes like Charkhi Dadri forced aviation authorities globally, including India, to rapidly mandate its installation. The beauty of it? It doesn't rely on ground radar, and it absolutely doesn't care if there's a language barrier. It talks directly to the other airplanes. The way it works is honestly brilliant. Your plane's TCAS sends out an interrogation ping on the 1030 MHz frequency. Every other plane nearby replies on 1090 MHz, essentially shouting back, "Hey, here's my exact altitude, and here is exactly how fast I'm moving." The computer inside your plane then builds a real-time 3D map of the sky. If it calculates that another plane is on a collision course with you, the computers on both planes secretly start talking to each other. In just a fraction of a second, those two computers negotiate a survival pact. One synthetic voice commands its pilot climb, climb, while the other synthetic voice commands its pilot descend, descend. It forces the aircraft apart with zero human hesitation. It's a real game changer.
Finally, let's wrap up with Part 5, human factors and safety.
For decades, the cockpit was basically a rigid dictatorship. The captain was treated as this infallible king, what they called the captain is God mentality. Following disasters like Charkhi Dadri, the industry realized they had to fundamentally transform crew resource management, or CRM, completely dismantling that hierarchy. CRM recognized something absolutely crucial. The most dangerous thing on an airplane isn't an engine failure. It's a junior pilot who is too terrified to tell the captain they're making a fatal mistake. The Kazakh plane desperately lacked proper flight discipline. They had no standard callouts, and when someone actually noticed the altitude was wrong, they didn't assertively cross-check it. Today, CRM dictates that every single person in that cockpit is a vital safety layer. They are trained and actually mandated to challenge authority if they spot an error.
The Lahoti report had this incredibly damning observation. They concluded the Kazakh crew weren't a team at all. They were just individuals trapped in the same metal tube. When the radio operator took the wrong instruction, the pilots didn't check it. When the plane started descending, no one yelled out standard altitude reminders. Because of the lessons learned at Charkhi Dadri, strict and mandatory aviation English testing, exact standard phraseology, and intensive team-building CRM training became the unwavering global standard. So, 349 people lost their lives in a matter of seconds over the fields of India. It's a profound tragedy. But because the aviation industry ruthlessly studied the holes in that Swiss cheese, upgrading radars, separating flight corridors, inventing the digital force field of TCAS, and fundamentally rewriting how humans communicate inside a cockpit, countless millions of lives have been shielded by a digital net they can't even see. So I'll leave you with this to ponder. The very next time you look out the window of a commercial jet at 30,000 feet, what other invisible systems of safety do you think are working right now, silently, to ensure you make it home?